Good morning. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick. I'm preparing for a draft in our football career football league. But I thought while I have time before we do that this morning, I would recap yesterday's White Box fantastic medieval adventure game using Island of Suul setting, which I wrote in 2015. Okay, so we were gonna have six. Let's see here. So session three, I'll try to put everything in context. So session three ended with Drew's dwarf blunder, literally on his last legs, almost dead, and down to one hit point, having been mortally wounded, almost mortally wounded by a Baalgaard, or at the time, who they believed were Baalgaard dwarves. He stumbled in, fleeing randomly in a direction, and it happened to take him into the mouth of the cave these two dwarves were guarding. Tripping a tripwire, he made his save, so he wasn't further crushed by the cave-in, and stumbled off into the darkness. The Dale and Donnie's characters dispatched the two Baalgaard dwarves there in the cave mouth, and this is middle of winter, and it is extreme conditions, so they have to make saving throws when they're in exposure for any period of time. They'll have to make a save or actually see their saving throw, their hit points cut in half. So it's extreme, and they can, of course, with shelter, heat, or nourishment, can remove that condition. All right, so that's not in the rules. That's part of this wonderful thing we do, right? We create our own environments. For our own worlds, our own characters. I mean, our own campaigns. Okay, so that's where it ended. Boom, right? Session. So unfortunately, Donnie and Drew couldn't make it, but easy enough, right? I mean, if you've done this as long as we have, you can literally leave characters out and find a way to get new characters in, and you have to, because the lethality of the OSR is so high that you're always going to have to fold new characters into your group, and you're going to have to park characters when people are unavailable, right? And if it's easier on a campaign, especially if you want to play regularly and you want to have a decent number of human beings to join you, you just got to be flexible that way. You got to find a way to just let it happen, right? So we just, I already hit in my head, said, okay, that's going to be simple enough. Donnie's going to take care of Drew's character, depending on how the game started, right? Because this, again, players, you don't know what players want to do and how they're going to do it. At least I give the players freedom to decide what they're going to do. This doesn't affect the world. This just affects whether they want to go into the cave and follow Drew's character, or if they want to abandon Drew's character. You know, I can't make them do what they don't want to do. I don't think that's something you've got to be flexible about as well. Hopefully, there's a camaraderie, right, where they would want to rescue Drew's character. Okay, we were going to introduce a new person, Eric Lawson, here in the group to the session. So he had privately written me. I said, what do you want me to make? I said, it's entirely up to you, but this is what we have. And he made a female cleric. He gave me her, and this is one of the things I never define the deities. I mean, I'll define the deities relevant to my NPCs in my world, but I won't make the players necessarily choose one of those deities, and I won't make the players necessarily confirm my world. They're free to say, well, my cleric's from the temple of the she-wolf, and we pray to this, whatever. It's up to them, right? They can come up with their own. It's part of letting them flesh out their own character. So he provided a brilliant little. I mean, this is the thing about old school too, right? One sentence, two sentences, and that's all we need, right? So I knew going in kind of a little bit. So to fit her into scene, starting session 4, because they're far removed from the main village that's their headquarters, their guild headquarters, so to speak. They're on in this harsh winter on the other side of the lake, in a neighboring village, in a mountain cave area behind that village. So I had to fit Eric's character into scene, and so I just wrote quickly in the Facebook group a quick synopsis of don't ask me so much why you're here, but your character in this cold dipped into this cave, hidden in an alcove as these two Baalgaard dwarves were obviously going out to guard the front entrance, and you managed to hide from them as they passed. And that would put her in the cave, where later Drew's character would run by her, right? So that's how that would start. He would basically come into scene, seeing Drew's character stumble by, almost dying. And then, of course, we knew where Dell and Drew were at. And then now I had to get, because Todd and Kevin were joining us, and Todd was in the very first session as Corvish, and it's been 3 months, right? We play once a month generally. I'm going to probably try to play once or twice a month now. I'm enjoying it, and I have time on the weekends. I just don't have time during the week. So unfortunately, I have to get all my gaming in on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, for the most part. Okay, so Todd was coming back after his character, and having not had a chance to play in sessions 2 and 3. So again, he knows his character, but he's kind of, you know how it is. You haven't been tracking this stuff. You've been busy with your own stuff. So, but again, we had to put his character into place. Well, his character I had basically sent with Jose and Eloy's character in fiction to pursue the gnome who had stole the town treasury, right? So it was assumed that those 3 warriors basically took off after this gnome thief. That launched session 1, okay? And so it's been assumed in the world that they're out there somewhere hunting this gnome thief. Well, to get Todd's character back into our area for now, I just wrote that he had gotten separated in the Shifting Sands Desert, which is very difficult to traverse. Got separated from Jose and Eloy's characters, and he ended up over the last few months banging around trying to get back to Unpilton. And again, he arrives on a stolen horse in this bitter winter, on the just an hour or so after everybody left for the other village, right? The whole village. Meanwhile, he has a companion named Diggy. This is Kevin's new character. He's a magic user, and he has attached himself to Todd's warrior. Somewhere on their journeys, he's met this magic user who's become his friend. And so I basically narrated them all the way up to Unlongis's camp. Okay, so Unlongus is the elder. He is the mayor of their little village. We're using what's called a random seed generator. So we have our world, we have our context, we have our lore, but we have zero plan, we have zero preparation. So it's almost like a random chart. It's almost like a random chart in that it's, but only in the sense that these are major potential conflicts that are suggestions. They're not even complete sentences. So to launch every session, I ask one player to roll that for me, and that gives me my seed, and I got to find a way to introduce. I have to think, well, what does this mean? And then I have to find a way to introduce it to the characters via rumor or via actual tragic, something happening right there. Then whatever the case may be, you just, as a GM, you've got to do this all the time. You've got to improvise all the time, and so I just launch all sessions in an improvisational manner. Okay. That led to him in session 3 rolling the villagers are arming for war. Well, I've never put them in a space of war before. So I described that all of a sudden all the villagers are out in this bitter cold, and they're all showing up in the middle of the village with their arms, with what arm they have, with what weapons they have, with what armor they have, and Unlongus is standing and giving a speech. And the player characters pass and go into the tavern, and they ask some questions, and they find out. I think I talk about this in the recap for session 3, so I don't want to waste a lot of time on that. But what they find out is this village has been in a long-going feud with a village on the other side of the lake, and that once a year or so, one of those they'll attack one another in some way, just almost a pathetic attempt to keep the feud going. But for some reason, right now, Unlongus has brought together all of the able-bodied men, women, and children to suit up, fur up in this cold, and march around and attack Unvargen, which is the opposing village on the other side of the lake, enraged, and they march off into this cold. So this was how session 3 started, and that was a random seed. Okay. So how do I put into context that they would be going to war magically? Poof, there's been no top. Well, I just invented this Hatfields and McCoy scenario where there's a village they're always fighting, right? I had to come up with a good reason that wasn't so dire that it changed, because this was a 14 on the chart. Again, on either end of the chart are huge potentially world-threatening, world-changing events. So 14 is still pretty significant. So of course they are legitimately going to war. I have to honor the random seed generator. It's just their war may be between just them and another little village. Okay. And it may be irrelevant to the larger scheme of the world because they're just villages. Okay. Okay, so the crew, that was session 3. So to get everybody in character, or everybody in space, I explained all this to Todd and Kevin, and I put their characters at Unlongus's camp at about 6 in the evening in this bitter cold and fog, just outside the village of Unvargas. And of course there they find out from Unlongus that their friends had gone into that village and into the mountains to prove whether the Baalgaard rumor existed. And Unlongus was in this state because he had heard rumor from a trusted friend that their enemy village, the rival village, had negotiated a deal with the Baalgaard. And the Baalgaard are the third largest kingdom in Island of Suul. They are the largest dwarf clan. They are the most dangerous dwarf clan. But either way, it doesn't make sense that they would be here unless there's something at stake. And so, but Unlongus was angry because he believes they've used the ball dragon to destroy his village crops in the summer. That's how the whole campaign started. A dragon was destroying their crops while a gnome absconded with their gold. Okay, that's how the whole campaign started. So here they are, and so then we got to get everybody in space. We got everybody together, and we do, right? We managed to get Drew on his feet. Drew's character Blunder, the dwarf king, on his feet. We narrate that Donnie aids the dwarf down back to Unlongus's camp, out of danger. They meet the young female cleric Delushaw, I believe. I never quite, but we called her Del, which became for me somewhat confusing because I would say Del, talking to Del, but. So I had to break that habit, which is a bad habit anyway. Normally I'm talking to characters, but okay. It was one of those. It was fantastic, but it was one of those moments a couple of times where I'm like, oh, whoops, yeah, whoops. Okay. All right. So session 4. Here we go. So they meet. And then Todd's character and Kevin come up, and they all meet. Now we've broken the ice. We've got our party for the evening together. It always takes a few minutes to organize those things, unless you just slide people in and out of the party, which you can't do. But you want to have some context. You want it to make sense. And so we got them together finally at the mouth of this cave, and they debated, what do we do? Should we, And Wolf argued that we have to verify this, and we probably should do this. They're not capable. Over half the village that made the trek died in the cold. They witnessed this as they passed frozen villagers, and they found bodies along the path around the lake. When they found Unlongus and his crew at a camp, barely alive, Unlongus had maybe 18 of his 45 villagers left. So he decimated his own village in this crazy. This crazy focused mindset in this cold. So Dell's character, I did it again, Wolf is Dell's character. Wolf says, we need to cut the head off the snake right here for these. Unlongus cannot possibly fight this village. He certainly can't fight the Baalgaard. We need to identify what's here. We need to prove it, and then we should probably just take it out. They all begrudgingly decided to investigate the cave, but none of them had committed to the idea of fighting the ball, nor their dragon, because again, there's an assumption the dragon must be with them. And remember, in my world, almost all dwarves are clans that worship and revere a dragon. They have a symbiotic relationship in which the dragon will not give them orders. The dragon is still a beast, but the dragon, for exchange of keeping his treasure and hoarding more and more treasure, he can be begged and pray. He can be pleaded to do their bidding. So these dwarves can basically then pray to their dragon and get him to do their bidding. Please go light up that village, right? But there's an exchange for that. They have to constantly provide the dragon a larger horde. Okay. And so most most dwarf clans all over the island are like that, but most of them aren't a kingdom like the Baal. The Baal are the largest, most feared. Okay, but there could be other dwarf clans that do this thing. They just might not have a red dragon. They might have something else, right? The smaller dragon or something. All right. Okay, so they decide to pursue in. Wolf steals ahead into the dark, utterly in the dark. He's willing to grope along with no vision at all. Very slowly, and he's looking for tripwires, which at this point, if there were any, again, utterly dark, zero ability to see, he would have found a tripwire, but he would have found it by literally stumbling across it. But, he didn't want to take a light source. Fortunately, there were no other traps, right? They trapped the entrance, that was it. He eventually bumps into a stone wall. He feels around and he feels something. He says, "Okay, I think we're here." The rest of the party with a torch catches up, and they've identified this stone door. And this stone door has 3 stone knobs on it that can be turned and twisted, and they all have a rune on them with an indicator, like this here, right? And they're all in a different formation. And so they put 2 and 2 together. The young Diggy steps up and becomes obsessed with it and starts studying it. And he says, I'm going to try to put together, how does this work? And without touching it really. And I'm going to toy with the knobs without moving them, right? And so Diggy starts making some notes. And this is investigation. And so I prefer players to tell me exactly what they're going to do. And I prefer players to be active. And to reward that, I'll very often give the information as opposed to asking them to make a roll. Some things are going to be hard to determine, though it'll require a roll. And some things, depending on their attribute score, I'll just flat, if they tell me that they're going to do it, they're going to look for traps and they've got a 17 wisdom, they're going to most likely find them, right? Okay. So he looked at it and I said, "What's your intelligence?" or whatever. And he said 16. I said, "Okay, so you're able to tell they all have to be aligned in a certain way." Okay. Which, again, I'm sure the player could figure that out, but that I gave him. And then he said, "Well, can I tell which way they've been moved the most," kind of thing? And I said, "Well, in this light with the torch, you'd look pretty good." And I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, make a roll and we'll see if you can see where the stone is more scarred up." And he made the roll. And I said, "Okay, it looks like they all turned to the right." But that's all I was going to give them. They were going to have to figure this out. Well, fortunately, Wolf stepped in and he said, "Listen, let me check this for traps before you start messing around with it." And he succeeds and finds that there are 4 little holes above every one of these knobs, and these little holes obviously are some kind of dart or spear or something. And so he warns everybody, and they all fold away against the wall, away from this, so whatever might come out of that, they'll be clear of the range of sight. And Diggory, from afar, twists them a couple of times, and sure enough, it shoots these darts out, all 4 darts. But on the last turn of the last one, once he spins it around and lets go, it shoots 4 darts out. So now they know, indeed, it's trapped. Now, is that the only darts? Is there other darts? Well, it doesn't make any difference. They stay safe. And meanwhile, the cleric is watching behind him, back down the passage, right? And I had rolled already another random seed. So every session we'll roll 1 that's major, and then if they solve that mystery, or they deal with that mystery, or they ignore that mystery, I roll another. I always keep a random seeds kind of folding into play, so we can end up with all kinds of variables that affect the game, and a lot of things can come up to entice the players, or maybe are fascinating or something, or just interesting, or more valuable to the players. And so I had rolled 3 in the first session that actually played great into the main problem. Okay, at this session, again, I had rolled as they went into the cave. I had made a roll, and on a random seed came up, and that random seed I folded directly into this cave scenario, and it was a great seed because it was directly related to the dwarves in this cave. And you try to make the random seeds before session, kind of like the only prep I really make are the random seeds around where the characters were last at. And then it's in context, right? Everything should be somewhat in context. Well, I didn't change everything on the chart from the first session because it's about the whole region. But so later I rolled another seed that just wasn't going to fit what they were doing. So I just leave it out, right? It's out there. Okay. Anyway, and so while they're fiddling with his door, the cleric hears down the hall, down the cavern, and this is stone. This is utter. I described to Todd's character Corvish, who's a mountaineer, a mountain climber, that he's not a dwarf, but he knows enough about mountains and rocks that when they get into this thing, I tell him, you can tell this is all natural. I mean, this is an actual crevice in a mountain, a granite hole in a mountain. And this is stone floors, stone walls, and there are other fissures in the rock that let cold air come through, and some of the fissures are wide enough a person could slide through. Some are too narrow, you can just get your hand in. Well, I described it back down the passage. You can't see, but you can hear. It sounds like somebody's coming up the passage or coming out one of those side fissures, and so he alerts everybody. Meanwhile, Dell's character focuses on the puzzle. And I ask him to make, so when he makes the move for all of them. And remember, the darts only go on the final twist, if it's wrong. If it's wrong. Okay? So, 3 can be wrong. If that last one is right, the darts won't shoot. So I have him make a lockpick check, basically. And so on the final one, he locks that into space. Now, if they actually pick the right direction, and I actually had proper directions for them. And I think they said they twisted that one down. And I basically said to Dale, you feel it locked in. I said, make a roll to make sure you understand that locked in. To catch that he actually put it in the right position. And so they knew that was right. And then they just went back to the top. And at that point, I didn't make him make any more rolls, right? He knows now what it feels like. So all he had to do was turn it until it settled, and then turn the second one until it settled in, and the third one until it settled in. I'm not going to make him roll and roll and roll. It's asinine. He already did it. So now he just has to perform all of it. But we narrate everything. Okay. But he had already succeeded the roll. Now, they still had to move it in the right pattern. So if they still fiddled around and wouldn't turn it to the point. But Dell basically said, I'm just going to work it until I feel that same thing. It was perfect. Okay. So the door releases and drops, but it doesn't open. It doesn't swing open. It's not a magic door. It's like a stone bolt or something. And they don't hear anything coming toward them. So whatever it was, boots on stone, was headed out of the cave the way they came. So they ignore it. They're like, okay, good. We dodged that bullet. They assumed it was a scout coming up to check the cave in. Okay. Meanwhile, before they got to this stone door, Wolf had heard clanging. A rhythmic kind of syncopated clanging, and they put 2 and 2 together. It must be mining. As there's a lot of people banging on rock and mining and carving and cutting rock out. And there were times they passed these open fissures that it was louder, echoing up from deep within the mountain. But the stone door muffled it quite a bit. Well, once they got this door and they pushed it open, they could clearly hear it now. It's cacophonous. It's ringing through this. They can see down a long passage. And they can see at the end of that long passage what looks like, they think, a couple of torches at the very end, 80 feet from them, down this long corridor. Again, they send Wolf, the thief, slinking up. He gets to the end. See, there are indeed 4 torches and sconces that open into a huge cavern. Again, the cavern from where he's at looks totally... part of this is hewn, like the floors are hewn at this point. The sconces on the walls are hewn. But much of the cavern is still... This was hewn out of cavern and out of fissures in the rock. But now we're starting to see it's legitimately partially hewn, right? Somewhere down in the annals of dwarves or whatever, they started work here to make this lair or something. And he sees a camp, a cavern with some tents and actually fireplace going. He can look up and see that way up there in the sky he can see stars, so he knows that there's some opening in this mountain so they could have fires and things without smoking them out. He counts 12 dwarves mingling around. They're all in leather armor. They all have weapons, and they're pretty laid back. They're pretty comfortable. They look like they're getting ready for bed, maybe. And the rest of the crew joins him at the end, and they watch. And Diggy casts a charm on the closest one, and he succeeds. And he technically rolled exactly what a HD1 creature needs. But they don't know it, but these are HD 1/2 to 1 creatures, right? They all had 1 hit point to 2 hit points. Now, they don't know this, right? Because, again, they shouldn't know this, right? There's got to be mystery and danger here. This happens to be a pretty pathetic, lowly I won't say pathetic. They're not the Baalgaard, right? But they don't know that yet. Okay, so HD 1/2, I wasn't going to give them that full hit. So basically, the 16 was a failure. So for those of you who might watch the AP and see the die roll and know the chart, that's why Charm Person worked. Okay, and so he just basically kind of hints and waves him over, and he stands up and comes over naturally, as if this guy's his commander. And he says, well, I'm Diggy. And he goes, oh, of course I know who you are, Diggy. And again, he's utterly, it's again, it's somewhat of a, again, it's his magic. So we can play with the abstract ideas of what charm is, right? Every GM may do this a little differently, and this is the beautiful thing about OSRs is players do this differently, GMs do this differently, and then hopefully your cultural play or one or the other in the session, can really make those role play moments go. And this was great. And so he says, he basically starts to ask information. How many of them are you? Oh, there's lots of us. Most of them are down below in the mines guarding the slaves. Oh, they're slaves. Oh, yeah, well, especially elves. We love to enslave elves. Well, you guys are the Baalgaard. No, we're not the Baalgaard. What about those Baalgaard dwarves? That was those guys were in disguise, right, to scare people off, kind of thing. So they learn, okay, this isn't Baalgaard dwarves. These are a different clan of dwarves. He doesn't really ask them the name of this clan. If he had, he would have found out they were the Maalgaard dwarves, Maalgaard. So we have the Baalgaard, and this happens to be the Maalgaard. And again, that means that they generally worship a dragon. So the Baal is the name of the Baalgaard dragon they revere, and then Maul would be the name of this dragon. Not all of these dwarf clans are going to be named that way, but this happened to be these two. But they at least know they're not equipped. They don't look like Baalgaard. They're not wearing the classic black with the emblem of the dragon like the Baalgaard. So all of those things kind of hinted that they weren't Baalgaard, these dwarves, but then he just flat asks, what about the Baalgaard? And they tell him, we're going to eventually be as great as the Baalgaard. So they now know that this is a mine. They're mining ore, and they're using slaves to do it. And there are quite a number of these dwarves on shift deep in the mines guarding these slaves. And they learn that there is a Maul, and they learn that Maul may have babies, right? 6. So Diggy does a great job getting, basically reconning, right? He's technically reconning through the charm by charming one of these ignorant dwarf guards. And then he sends him away. We'll go, thank you, I'll talk to you later if I need to. Go back and have your dinner and go, go to sleep. And during all of this conversation, by the way, all of the cacophonous clanging and banging stopped. And it stopped for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then there was a horn echoed through the whole cavern, and slowly but surely you could hear the clanging until the cacophony of mining started again. And so they could assume that there was some break there, either a break or dinner break or something. And the guard had also let them know that these slaves work round the clock. Okay, they basically that's what's going on here. So again, Wolf begrudgingly, they all have a long conversation, and as they're watching these dwarves, these 12 on this top floor of the cavern, bed down. Many of them are still awake and eating, but many have laid down, bedded down, and gone into their tents. And obviously, this is a shift change, or this is a shift that's resting. Okay. And they debate long and hard, and they ultimately convince Wolf, we gotta go back. We gotta get out of here, go back, and talk to somebody about this. At least tell Unlongus. And boy, but what are we gonna tell him that would make him stop this craziness? So they're also in a quandary, because how do we convince Unlongus with the information we do have that this is still a bad idea? They really only have one thing going for him. It's not the ball, right? Which is what Unlongus was so upset about. But aside from that, it's still true. It might still be seen as true by Unlongus. It's not the ball, but there's still a dragon that this village has in effect used against them. But they don't have enough information to know why, who, what. So they decide they're going to go back. They're going to go back to the village. And I describe it. They go back through. They make sure they reset the door. They pull their spikes out of the door. They had hammered in spikes to keep that door open. They did everything right. Dungeon crawl. These guys are expert dungeon crawlers, right? They put everything back in its place. And as they get to the cave entrance, I described that both the dwarves that were dead, that they left there, had been aligned, and they had been clearly tampered with, pulled over, put in the line, and they had been pilfered. Right? Somebody had taken a shield, somebody had taken an axe. So apparently, whoever had come out behind them and headed out stopped along the way to arrange these dwarves in with some respect, but also pilfered their bodies and left. So they missed whoever that was. Okay. They then decide they're going to go back down through town. And as they come back through town, and now the village of Unvargan, they learned in session 3, right smack in the... They learned a couple of things in session 3 that were a surprise. One, Unvargan village was a dwarven village, which is, again, they weren't a traditional clan. At least that's what they thought. They were a village of dwarves, not a clan of dwarves. And right smack in the middle of town is this huge dwarven statue of a dwarf leader, king, something. And when they came back to town, again, remember, this is now 8 o'clock at night. It's bitter cold, dense fog. And they all come around the largest building in town sets right on the edge of going out of town into the mountains. And in front of it is this huge dwarven statue. And as they come down around that path, they see the dwarf. And I ask them all to make a quick intelligence or wisdom check. It's their choice, right? It's either smarts or common sense. And they all recognize immediately the statue looks a lot like these dwarves. It's garbed in similar armor. It has a similar build as those dwarves. It might have a shorter beard, shorter whatever. But either way, they recognize immediately that the statue of that dwarf looks a lot like those dwarves up there in the cave that we just watched, just talked to. So they start putting 2 and 2 together. Ooh, wait a second. This, and he said, well, this is a new statue. I said, no, it's been here a long, long time. Okay. All right. So they decide, again, now there's another dimension here. Okay, man, how old is this going on? What is going on? And they decide they're gonna literally, well, they don't so much as Diggy just says, fine, I'll do it. And he walks up and he bangs on the door of the largest structure. And this is a stone. These are all stone buildings, and this is a strange architecture in that the base, the first floor stone here, the other one is staggered, and they all stagger on top of each other. So there's actual different levels of roofs, right? Very strange stone architecture, but it's 4 stories high. It's as high as the dwarf statue. It is clearly it's the largest building in this small village, and they're all 2-story stone homes in this village center. They're all affluent, definitely a better quality village than the one they've been living in for months. Okay. Now, but yet there's no indication of farming. So again, maybe 2 and 2 coming together here. They're clearly affluent because they probably have been mining ore out of this for who knows how long, right? What's going on? Okay. They bang on this door, and Diggy talks to a dwarf through an eye. The guy slides it open and says, who are you? What are you doing here? And he shuts it. Diggy convinces him to come out and talk to him, so he won't let him in, but he and 2 guards come out. They lock. They can hear him bolting the door as they come out. They talk. They do spot, the cleric spots that there's definitely deceit here, right? When Diggy says to them about the bald dwarves, the dwarf he's talking to doesn't give it away, but the other 2 dwarves, the cleric witnesses, make eye contact when he says Baalgaard dwarves. And the look on their faces like, uh-oh, this is tricky. Hope Joe can get out of this. So the cleric spots this. And the cleric kind of hints to Diggy, no, these guys they're lying to you. So Diggy says, so then the dwarf says, oh gosh, this is horrible. You need to come in and talk about this. And Diggy's like, well, okay, I'll come in with you. But Corvish needs to go get our supplies out of the village. Kind of hinting that don't come in with me, but go get out of here. And Wolf hid in the dark. They don't even know Wolf's there. Wolf slinked back behind the corner of the building and stayed hidden in the fog in the dark. They don't even know he's there. The cleric stands, just again watching, and nudges Diggy when she sees this. And Corvish says, yes, I'll go get our supplies. And so Diggy follows the guard that's been talking to him into the building. But he leaves the other two guards with the cleric and Corvish. And again, they don't know that there's a third person. And they go in, they hear it all bolt shut. And the dwarf says, "Go, let's go get your supplies. I'm going with you." And Corvus is like, "Oh, okay, yeah, all right." And he leads him off into the fog, down into the village. Meanwhile, the cleric drops to her knees and she's praying, and the other dwarf interrupts her. The other dwarf guard doesn't want to let her pray, and so he's asking questions. Who do you pray to? Who's your dragon god? Or what dragon do you pray to? And so he's bugging her so she can't pray, right? Meanwhile, he's also taunting her that not really taunting her, but he's kind of hinting that you'd pray to what, it's kind of a ruse just to keep her talking and not praying. Okay, Corvish leads him down, and Wolf mirrors them in the dark through the buildings. He's pursuing Corvish and this dwarf hidden. He's prepared to basically step out of shadows and backstab this dwarf, if indeed he has to. Well, Corvish makes a surprise move on his follower. He points out a couple of things. I'm not certain kind of what, is it over here? Is it over here? And he gets that dwarf looking about, and then he shield bashes him, knocks him out cold, and ties him up. And Drew steps out of the darkness and says, good move. They tie him up, and Wolf heads back up to the cleric, and that cleric ends up, they hear that shield bash, and the cleric then, while that dwarf steps up in the dark listening, what was that? Did I just hear something down in the village? The cleric waylays from behind this other dwarf, and we got a melee in front of this large building, and this statue between the cleric and one of the guards. We have Corvish and Wolf dragging this captured dwarf up the hill in the dark. Meanwhile, inside, we have Diggy, and he walks into this room. They shut the door. It's warm. He looks up, and the room is packed. This small little base floor room is packed with 9 dwarves all staring at him. And he's in it now. He's deep in it. Well, what he doesn't know is they're all going to be taken as slaves, and they're going to be worked to death in the mines. But he goes with Diggy's nonsense. Diggy's yammering on, yammering, nervous yammering, and trying to talk. And this dwarf just watches him and says, "Do you want a final dinner? Because you're going to be working. You're going to work the rest of your life for us in the mines." And he sits down. And he says, "Well, I want this." And he goes, "Here's cheese." And he goes, "I want duck, and I want roasted duck for this meal." And he said, "No, here's bread and cheese. Call it duck. Eat." And then Diggy says too much, right? Kevin says, Diggy says something about the Baalgaard, and this dwarf looks at everybody around the room and says, "You know too much, kill him." And so 4 of them grab him and start to drag him off to the backside of the room, where they're going to ultimately not kill him. They would have poured a drink. They would have forced a drink down his throat that would have put him unconscious. Then he would have woke up in the mines a slave. But Diggy doesn't know this, right? So he begins to mumble quickly, sleep, and 5 of them, boom, 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 drop out cold, and there's 4 left scrambling around trying to stop him. And as they rush him, he mumbles again, invisibility, and poof, Diggy vanishes. So now it's mass chaos in this little room as these 4 dwarves are racing around trying to find him, invisible, flipping over stuff and knocking tables out of the way and chasing Diggory around this room. Diggy. Meanwhile, the guard boss, or the one that was doing all the talking, is trying to wake up the ones that went down. Meanwhile, they all come up to the top. Wolf and the cleric dispatch the dwarf that was fighting, and this is Eric's fantastic. It's wonderful to invite people to play, and it's wonderful to invite strangers to play. And then it's of course, anytime you do that, you don't know what you're going to get, right? Are you going to get a veteran player? Are you going to get a new player? Are you going to get somebody who likes what we do or whatever? So sometimes I've done this periodically in my 12 years on YouTube. I like to invite acquaintances and people, strangers, to play. And this is how I meet people, and this is how I found some of the greatest players and some of the greatest sessions of my career, is by inviting people to play. Inviting them to our hobby. And Eric's fantastic. And when Wolf steps out of the shadows and kills this dwarf before her eyes, he describes that she's never seen this before. She's a cleric and she's on her early adventures, but she's never seen straight murder before. She's never seen straight death before, and she describes seeing the dagger punch through his chest, and it makes her physically ill. So she steps away, vomiting. She just can't believe this. As the blood fills the snow on the ground, and Dell wipes, Wolf wipes his dagger off. The job done. Puts his dagger away as Corvish drops the unconscious dwarf down, shakes his head. Corvish is this warrior that's not keen to kill, which is freaking cool. Todd is, it's brilliant, right? He's a warrior, but he's not keen to kill for no reason. Meanwhile, they hear the banging around through the door, this bolted door, and this door is indeed bolted. It would have been a very difficult breach to kick this door, and it would have taken them time. I wouldn't have stopped them from breaching this door, but it would have taken hammering away at it with their axes or something to get this door up. Meanwhile, Wolf goes over and with a knife, his dagger, slides it in and flips the shutter, and the window shutter opens, and he can see in. He sees this dwarves are scrambling around looking for something, and they're waking some of the dwarves, and so he starts to cock his crossbow. Meanwhile, Eric again as Delashaw, she bangs the door, and she knows just enough dwarf and enough words that she fakes help in dwarf help. This is one of the guards kind of thing, and immediately the dwarf leader that was doing all the talking unlatches and says, "Yes, get in here. We've got a problem." At the same time, Diggy, who has avoided being at this point touched, as I made multiple rolls to see at -4. Remember, invisibility, not attack rolls, but to catch him rolls at -4. And I modified that by confined spaces, and I modified that by the sheer number of dwarves banging around in this room. So they had to roll a particular to hit number to grab him, with that -4 modified by the number of dwarves and the size of the room. So I modified that back up to 0. So it would have been a normal -4 to hit him in combat. But when you have 8 dwarves in a small room looking for an invisible person, grasping and reaching, the odds are they're going to touch him. They're going to find him. They're going to handle him. He can dodge him, etc. So I just moved that -4 up to a -0, and I still had to roll the successful to hit for them to touch him. Okay. And so I did that for every turn all at once. So I rolled it 5 or 6 times. Those would be for every turn, so I didn't have to stop every turn and roll it. So I already had rolled 4 or 5 times. I knew that on the third roll, they were going to touch him, which was going to be the third turn. So I just got like 5 turns under my belt, so I didn't have to fool with it. Okay. And then I just checked off that, it was going to happen. So, and this did happen. Like on the third one, I described how one grabbed his robes, his invisible robes, while he was trying to get out the door. So Diggy sees the door open. So Diggy runs for the door, grabs it, and pushes it open beyond the hands of the leader dwarf. And she stands in with shield and basically blocks the door from these dwarves. Diggy, invisible, scoots past. She feels that and uses her shield to break off the other dwarf from being held. So Diggy, invisible, out the door. She stands now in the doorway facing 2 dwarves, and they end up in a melee in the door. With her shield, she's trying to keep these dwarves from coming out. Meanwhile, Wolf is putting bolts best he can. Remember, it takes 2 turns to load this sucker, but it's at close range. So he kills one in the room, and he's cocking. She's kills one in the door. Corvish steps beside her. So the door's big enough you can go 2 abreast, and she steps in. And Corvish, again, this is what I love about a white box. Fighters get an attack per level per turn if they're facing an HD half or HD 1. These are HD half. Basically, Grunt, Maul, Dwarf clan. So they all have 1 or 2 hit points. And so he gets 3 attacks per turn. And Corvish is just waylaying these dwarves. And remember, there are 9 in this room. And they're all awake now at this point because the leader had roused them while the others were trying to find Diggy. Diggy stands out there and starts throwing darts. Starts throwing his daggers from the street at the door. Anyway, this unbelievable chaos ensues. Corvish and company waylay 9 of these dwarves. In a matter of 3 or 4 rounds, Corvish is almost killed. I mean, he is cut up pretty bad, outnumbered. This is what I love about minions. minions are, in my opinion, it's what's going to happen in fantasy when we have small groups of heroes. They're not heroes per se, but in small groups of parties, right? They're going to, in the world, they're going to face greater numbers. And so if you make those greater numbers always equal to the party in hit points, you're going to TPK your party all the time. So in real life, we might have a tribe of gnolls that aren't superior gnolls, right? They can be lesser gnolls. They might still be as dangerous as far as AC and damage, but they might not have as much hit die, right? That kind of thing. So my point is, this is my world, these are my dwarves, and not all dwarf clans are Baalgaard. So these guys happen to be 1/2 HD creatures, right? Well, not 1/2, they're one, basically. But the point is, they all had 1 or 2 hit points. And so Corvish gets 3 pops, 3 attacks per turn, and they only have 1 or 2 hit points. He's killing them. He's weighing them. And of course, Dell's character's taking them out. And the cleric. But unfortunately, this is what I love about this. They're outnumbered. So it's dangerous. No matter how much more powerful they are, no matter how easy it is to dispatch these low level, they're outnumbered. And the odds are they're going to get hit and they're going to take damage. The cleric is knocked unconscious. She is almost killed. She's down to -2 by the time Diggy rushes to her aid and stabilizes her. And they don't have to make a roll. All they got to do is aid her to stabilize her, bring her to 1, wake her up. But she still needs to be healed. So at about 5 turns, I think it was 5 rounds before it was all said and done, one of them escapes up the stairs to the next level. They try to get him, but he gets up the stairs into the next. Remember, this is 4 levels high. These 4 blocks that are staggered high, and there's these weird kind of windy stairwells that are. All of this is wooden. All the infrastructure is wooden. Only the walls are stone. Right. Okay. And Corvish stands in this room among 8. Yeah, I mean, and I said you're standing among 8 dead dwarves in this little room, and you are covered in blood. I mean, so she wakes up. The cleric wakes up, looks around her at all these bodies and blood, and sees Corvish, and again has to kneel and vomit. She just can't. This is she's never seen this. The smell of blood like this, etc. Eric is fantastic, man. It was great. So she was a virgin explorer. Now she's seeing the world. She's seeing how dangerous this world is. So Corvish and they all discuss it. We're out of here. We're all hurt. She's almost dead. We know what we need to know. We're going back to Umlongus, and we're gonna rest, and we're gonna talk some sense into this fool. We know more, and this is not what we thought it was. This is crazy. But Wolf won't hear it. Wolf's like, I'm going to cut the head off the snake. I'm going up those stairs. I'm going to go get that guy. I'm going to at least finish that guy off. And so they say, fine. They all go down the village, out, and he stays. And he cocks he throws some stuff around and cocks his crossbow, and he starts heading up the stairs. Meanwhile, the dwarf up top has poured oil down the stairs, and he's waiting for Wolf to get right smack in the nose, and he's going to light that off. And so I describe how he sees this viscous fluid coming down the stairs, and it's almost to your feet. Well, Wolf has a turn to back up and get off the stairs as he watches this pour down, and he takes an ember from the burning fire pit and throws it on it himself. Or actually, no, I think he throws it upstairs. He throws it up the stairwell, and so it hits in the room and boom, explodes. He sees it lights up the stairwell that he was going to take up. He hears then the person in that room up there spook, and his feet scrambling on the floor as he starts up another level. So he's down below. It's burning so bad he can't take the stairs and follow him up. So he adds to the fire. He starts pitching everything in the room upon this fire to get it really blazing and smoke him out. If not, burn the place up, smoke him out. And I describe how he can hear him climbing all the stairs to the top. And so Dell's Wolf goes back out in the street, stands by the statue and watches the roof, watching to see if this guy shows up and emerges from a window or a roof. And sure enough, I say he emerges from the roof, and he goes to every edge of the roof, looking off, thinking about jumping. I mean, clearly this dwarf doesn't want to burn to death. And at this point, I said, you can see flames taking the shutters out on the second tier, and then on the third, you can start to see smoke pouring out. Meanwhile, the party that's walking down back to the village looks back, and they can hear the crack. They can see this glowing. They can't really see much in the fog and the darkness, but they can see the glow, and they know, something. We don't know what Wolf did, but he did something. All right, let's hope he's not dead, right? They go on down to Unlongus. They meet Unlongus on the rise. There's a hill that hides his little camp from the village. And they meet him on the hill, and he points and says, "What's that glow? It looks like a fire in the village, at the highest point in the village." And they all go, "Well, we think it's Wolf. Something Wolf's done." Anyway, he then feeds them and says, "Let's work on your wounds." They had done binding of wounds on the cleric, by the way, before they left that fight, which got her back up to 5 HP. They bring her into camp, and they're going to take care of him. Meanwhile, Wolf waits and trains his crossbow on the guy, waits till he has a good shot, makes the roll, misses the shot. Meanwhile, the dwarf, at this point, the fire has moved to the fourth floor, and it's smoking and inside. Remember, the interior is wood, all wood, but the walls are stone, so it's burning. This thing is burning, even though the stones can't burn down. And he finally decides he's going to jump 10 feet down to the next roof, and then he'll try to make another jump. I make the roll, saving throw to see if it cuts any damage in half. I rolled a 2, excuse me. So he made his save, and he made his, and he only suffered 1 point of damage. But again, these guys were 2 point minions, and I had told them that at some point during the fight. I said, "Listen, they have 2 hit points. So if you do more than 2, you've killed them." So no mystery here, okay? Wolf hears him cry out as he breaks his leg when he hits that, or whatever. When he hits that, it almost kills him. And then I said, you watch as he stumbles to the other 10 feet and rolls off, trying to get to the ground, and hits on that second rooftop and doesn't move. You hear him hit, you hear him cry out, and then you watch for a moment, and he doesn't stand up, he doesn't move. You can pretty much bet he's probably dead. And then Wolf says, I've done what I need to do here. If anybody else is in there, they're done. They're burned up. I think we got them all." And he runs through the village, through the darkness, through the trees, etc., and arrives at Unlongus's camp. And he immediately says, "Where is my woman?" and just passes everybody, pushes Unlongus out of the way as Unlongus is asking questions. And he says, Saltine is in her tent, tending the dwarf king. And he just goes right by him and into the tent, and fade to black. That was session 4. I did let Del know. Well, we'll save all that. But session 4, that was session 4. Fantastic. Todd, wonderful to have Todd and Kevin join us, and Eric. Again, we missed Drew and Donnie a lot. They're 2 fantastic people and great players, and we're just going to keep trying to do this once a month. Maybe sometimes I'll try to do two a month of Island of Suul, because again, I want to play more. I just haven't had time during the weeknights. So we'll see how that goes. But that was session 4, Island of Suul. Thank you for listening.